What's good, y'all? It's your boy Jay Connor, host, journalist, and one half of the Extraordinary Negroes. In having this conversation focused on Black men, I'd like to take a moment to send our thoughts and prayers to Jacob Blake, who on Sunday fell victim to racialized violence at the hands of local police officers. But in regards to the subject at hand, I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight for this much-needed conversation on allyship, misogyny, masculinity, and the Black community, courtesy of the fine folks at HBO Max and Hot 97. If you'd like to join this conversation on social media, please use the hashtag #OnTheRecord and tag @OnTheRecordDoc, as well as @Hot97. Now let's get to it. On the Record, which is currently streaming on HBO Max, takes a deep look at the cultural forces that pressure Black women to remain silent after surviving sexual assault. This film specifically takes a look at hip hop culture and the abuse of power that has been exhibited by influential Black men in this industry. Before we begin, I want to state that we unequivocally believe the women who came forward in this film, and we cannot engage in critical dialogue about this subject without addressing our support and ensuring that we center the stories of Black women as they courageously share their truth. As we all know, and as history has proven time and time again, Black women have consistently served as catalysts for change, specifically in regard to racial justice, and commonly in response to rampant mistreatment of Black men. However, as Black women come forward with their abuse at the hands of prominent Black men, far too often we fail them. They receive limited or conditional support from each of us. So tonight, we're coming together to unpack this and hopefully drive more conversation among Black men about the silencing of Black women and how we can truly show up as allies for them. Joining me tonight is Ebro Darden, host of Hot 97's Ebro in the Morning, Jidenna, recording artist and actor, and Milan, educator, writer, and advocate. We've all had a chance to watch this powerful film. So before we get started, I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on this movie and why coming out of it, this conversation is so important. Let's start with Ebro.
I think it goes without saying in everything you just said, which is, not only do we need to give space, but we need to start paying attention and listening. We know that we live in a very patriarchal and toxic masculine society. It's been that way for generations, centuries even. And here you have some women who were, marginalized, hurt, damaged, disregarded, ignored. And I think in the effort of all of us healing, growing, learning, and doing better, we need to lean into these conversations, whether it's painful or not, and as men, I think it's, if you're being a man, taking responsibility and accountability for not only your own behavior, but individuals that, you may not know, but can maybe teach, is all of our responsibility,
right.
As the greater Black community. So, that was my feeling about it. That's why we had Drew on the air, so that we can have, dialogue with her and give her space and her platform.
Right. We're going to touch on that here in a little bit. Teek, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, so and I watched the film. I was enraged. I think a lot of times there are times where I had to step away from it and then come back to it. But I was enraged and I was heartbroken just thinking about all the women who have had their lives derailed and their dreams deferred because some man couldn't have their way with them. And thinking about all the women who are walking around with all this trauma in their hearts and on their minds and having to act like everything is okay and having to be strong for the people who are out here causing them harm. I was embarrassed. As a transgender man, I've been in this world as a man for the last 15 years. And I'm like, well, damn, this is the cohort of masculinity that I have to be associated with every single day. I was left with more questions than answers, and a lot of questions that are really complicated that I don't know that I have the answer to. But it was really heartbreaking, and also just thinking about the bravery of these women to come forth and to say what they had to say, knowing the backlash that they're going to get. You have 19 women allegations over here. You have, we had the whole thing with Cosby, 52 allegations, and everybody found a way to tear these women down. But they had to stand in their truth and tell what happened to them, despite that this could just ruin their lives even more. So I commend the women for being a part of this, but I'm absolutely disgusted by what happened to them and what is happening in our culture.
Yeah, right. Jidenna?
I mean, I think one of the most heartbreaking ideas or heartbreaking issues that I see is that I was not surprised I'm not surprised when I watch this on the record. I wasn't surprised with Jeffrey Epstein, R. Kelly, and the list goes on with a lot of people that, you know, the world doesn't even know because they're anonymous men or they're anonymous women. They're not famous or celebrities. Here's the thing that I loved about On the Record, though. That was, I think, a positive thing for people to take away. It humanized the women who were assaulted. Drew Dixon, I got to see her story. I felt her. I related to her. I related to the neighborhood she's in, you know, not just because of me living in Brooklyn, but just because I saw her in the world. I saw her contributions. Sometimes I see films or documentaries or pieces where I don't get to know enough about the women. And I think that one of the most important things that we can do in creating pieces like this is humanize women, because if these men saw women as human beings, they would not be assaulting, they would not be harassing, they would not be trying to diminish and strangle women's lives if they really saw the humanity in women. And so I really appreciate it On the Record for doing that.
Right. It's less about a woman's proximity to a man and more about, you know, their individual agency and being mindful and respectful of that. You know what I'm saying? So let's get right to it. And this is for everybody. This panel comes at a time in which our community is engaged in a bit of a civil war. We have multiple Black male entertainers that have been accused of abhorrent, abusive behavior, and has become far too commonplace. The response towards these Black women who have survived this abuse has been anything but supportive. Their statements are invalidated, motives are called into question. And in looking at the case of Megan Thee Stallion, she was ridiculed relentlessly despite falling victim to gun violence. So being mindful of this cycle of behavior while keeping this film in context, why are these the type of responses that Black women deal with when coming forward with their truth? And why are their stories challenged and reduced to nothing more than mockery, harassment, and memes? We'll start with Jidenna.
I think that the reason why we see a situation occur like what happened with Megan, which is appalling and disgusting, not just the act that Tory committed, but the silence, and then moreover, people slandering her. I believe that it starts at the root, which is Black men's feeling of powerlessness. I think because Black men feel consistently powerless, we literally have created a culture of bravado, and hip hop is like the pinnacle of it. So in that culture, and that's why you have certain rappers that are literally just all bravado, being the ones that are throwing insults at her. So if because we feel deflated, we feel like we have to deflate the women that are next to us. And that, to me, is the root. If we reckon with our own power and figured out how we could actually access it and get rid of the patriarchal ideas that we have, then I think that we'd actually get to a point where we're supporting women more than throwing them under the bus and making ridiculous memes in situations that are devastating, not just for women like Megan, but women all over the world that nobody gets to hear their story.
Right. T?
Yeah, I think that oftentimes what happens is that we ask Black women are you Black first or are you a woman first? And asking them to kind of like make fractions of their identity instead of bringing all the layers to them, because what we do is when we fraction that gives us space to be less accountable. Right, and Black women are always supposed to be race loyal before they can be loyal to themselves. And even your sister in the film had said it. She was like, so often, I think it was Kimberly Crenshaw who said that Black women are supposed to silence and muffle their screams in order to protect the men who are causing them harm. And we do that all the time. And when they step outside of that, then they are, a disgrace to their race. And even Drew has said that. She said, I love the culture. I love Russell. I didn't want to do this. And that happens all the time. And this is something that is historic. You know what I'm saying? And I think Jidenna really hit it on the head when he said Black men feel powerless. And Black men feel powerless. And the only way that lots of Black men feel power is if somebody else is on their knees. So if you can only stand if somebody else is on your knees, then what is left of you? Right? If your only power comes from everything outside of you, then who are you on the inside? So I think it's a deeper conversation around like our spirit and our subconscious, and also And it's this idea that Black women are over-sexualized and that they're strong, right? And so that they can't be raped, right? Because she must have wanted it because of how fly she is, because of her body type, or she wanted it because she's around this man. A woman can look however she wants to look. She can hang out with the man at 2 a.m. if she wants to. That does not mean that she deserves to be violated. It does not mean that she's taking away her agency. And I think oftentimes because Black men don't have agency, what they try to do is take away the agency from other people that do that. So take it away from women, they take it away from LGBT people, and sometimes take it away from children.
Right. Ebro?
Specifically in the Megan Thee Stallion thing, we're not on the radio, right? This is just on the internet right now.
I believe so, yeah.
People are full of shit. Real talk. One, we give way too much weight to idiots and YouTube comments.
Yeah.
And stupid motherfuckers who make memes on the internet.
Yep.
Way too much weight.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that specifically with the Megan Thee Stallion, because we have to ask ourselves sometimes, who are the individuals that are perpetuating the bullshit?
Right.
I was very clear early on that I wasn't fucking with Tory Lanez. Even before Megan Thee Stallion felt forced to come out and say his name. She told us someone tried to harm her. She told us she was a victim.
Mm-hmm.
She told us she was hurt and shot in her feet. And we also learned that the gun in the car was with Tory Lanez. I didn't know what me and my girlfriend was having debates about it. Me and my lady I was like, babe, why aren't more men speaking out? Like, what's the problem? I don't understand. What's the problem? And dudes was like, well, we don't know if Tory Lanez really did that. What are you talking about, bro? Like, what are you saying right now?
Yeah.
Like, and the reason I unpack it like that is because there's multiple things happening here. There's what you guys all articulated. There's also the street element in this one, specifically with the Megan Thee Stallion. And even her saying, I didn't want to have to say Tory's name because she didn't want to say his name to the police. That was, she didn't want to be seen as someone who's talking to the police. She also didn't want to tell the police there was a gun in the car, which is a whole other layer, because she was afraid that if they found out there was a gun in the car, based on historical evidence, they may be in harm's way from the police.
Right.
By being Black folks with a gun in the car. So
Right.
there was multiple things at play in this. And then we also just have to remind ourselves that the street, everything's a joke, it's all a game, kind of culture that permeates the internet specifically, which is a lot of young people who are just being irresponsible. We can't always act like that's everybody, even if it's loud and noisy. Because I saw plenty of people, Black folks, men, maybe because I'm older, who were like, the fuck is y'all problem? This is terrible, right? But that wasn't getting carried anywhere. Even 50 Cent, who came out and apologized after he posted something. You know what I'm saying? He's always reckless and careless. But some of this comes from the dysfunctional street culture and hood culture that many of us come from. There's a lot of dysfunction in that. And so we can't just act like that's not also a part of this.
Yeah.
But then you also have to look at, like, this is what I was stuck on. In what world does a man pull a gun on a woman and shoot her in her feet? Like, what planet are we on right now?
Right.
At 3 a.m. when they just coming home from a party, like, what's really going on? And so that is a blatant disregard for humanity, as Jidenna spoke to, and a blatant disregard for Megan as a person. I don't know if they were I mean, they in the car together at 3 a.m. I gotta assume they knew each other somewhat. They was partying the whole weekend. That's something that Tory Lanez has to unpack, that dysfunction that he's got to unpack now. And so, you know, I put all that together because I just don't want us to always give so much weight to people who hide behind their keyboards on the internet and phones, because there are, and clearly not enough and not loud enough, but we live in a society that celebrates dysfunctional culture. Look at the president right now. You know what I'm saying? On many levels, our society as a whole celebrates toxicity.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's real.
You know, and I think,
yeah,
and I'm just, you know, I was saying, like, you know, in what world, it's in this world, one of the leading causes of death for Black women between the ages of 18 to 24 is domestic violence. So women are being killed in their homes by the men who are supposed to protect them. Like, this is a real thing. And we're talking about this documentary and we're talking about Megan Thee Stallion, but this is happening every single day. Right now, a woman is getting brutalized. Right now, a woman is getting raped. Right now, a woman is dying at the hands of a man who was supposed to love her. And I'm 40 years old. Through my 40 years on this earth, I've lost 3 different women to domestic violence, who I love very, very much. Like, this is very real. This is pervasive. This is femicide. And we always talk about, like, femicide as if it's something that's not a part of American culture, but it absolutely is. Women are being killed by us on a regular basis. Like, it's real. It's real.
Well, and keep going there. And keep going there. And let's get into, even with this film or this documentary, the fragile male ego and the lack of accountability. And when you take step backs and you look and you take step back and you look at all men being raised in households that maybe there wasn't a responsible male figure, and or your mom, when raising you, didn't hold you accountable to your actions in a boys will be boys kind of environment. And so now you become an adult male that never has to take responsibility for their actions because you always had somebody caping for you. Or there wasn't a figure around to hold you accountable, whether it was male or female. Like, I had both. I had my mom who wasn't having it and was gonna make you do what you had to do, and she didn't want to hear it. And I had my dad who was who was with the smoke at every turn. You know what I mean? So that was, accountability was a thing, you know, but that's not common. And I think that as men, when we go out in the world, and I even talk about this sometimes on the air. Think about that young man who doesn't have a responsible male figure around him that first time he asked a girl to the dance. And he's at school and he asked that girl to the dance for the first time, and everybody kikiing and laughing. You know what I mean? And let's say she says no. Let's just say she says she don't want to go to the dance. Where in society are the places where a boy or a young man goes to have that conversation about that pain, about that rejection, to deal with rejection? Where in our society is that taking place? There a magazine that takes place in? Because I know when you think about women and them unpacking their emotions and dealing with their trauma, they have their groups and their circles where they deal with that. And when is the last time any of us listened to these rappers that are saying the wrong things and listen to their pain in their music? We're listening to 20-year-olds coming from the mud. They come from the mud, and they're talking about, you know, pain and I could point y'all to probably 4 albums from young rappers right now, from Chicago to North Carolina, who literally have songs on their album called Depression. And is anybody listening to those albums going, hey, man, is anybody checking on this young man? Or are we only paying attention to the negativity that young man perpetuates? Because that's some of the work we have to do too. We got to start listening to what's being said. And, you know, men, we mask our dysfunction and our toxic masculinity behind, as Jidenna said, this bravado and swag and, you know, our insecurities. You know, the toughest talking, hardest talking dude is always the one, you know, is the most sensitive. You know, so he's masking being a tough dude, you know, and talking hard and what he about to do, really because he's the most sensitive. And so are we actually delving into that as older men, and are we creating a space for that in society where men can get into this?
Yeah, nah. Those guys are always the most sensitive. My theory is just that men are actually more emotional, more sensitive. Period.
Because less educated on how to deal with it.
It's
socially unacceptable to learn how to deal with it.
It's unacceptable, and so that's why you got the Tory Lanez situation with Megan. Like, what is he, 5'3"? She damn near 6 feet, and he damn near 5'3". You're literally dealing with Napoleon complex already off top, and outside of that situation, there's plenty of men that, because they cannot deal with the emotions, because they are sensitive, they lash out in the only way that they know how, which is usually physical abuse or verbal abuse. And that's it. So I think that, to your point, Ebro, like, if we created better systems and institutions and a culture where, as you grow, because I certainly ain't the same. I was a young boy. Like, you talk about that dance being rejected. I remember when I probably said this on the air. I don't know if I said this with you, Ebro, but I remember dancing, doing some dance hall song, and I had my hand on this young, I was like probably 15, 16, going to them under 18 club. I had my hand on her lower back, and my homie came over like, bro, put your hand on her ass. I had never met this girl, but I was like, I didn't feel right doing it, but he's like, put it on. He moved my hand to her ass, and she laughed a little bit, like as if to accept it. But I know she didn't accept that. She didn't accept that moment, and I didn't know what to do with how I felt, because I felt like I was supposed to be assertive as a man. I was supposed to be forward. I was supposed to be aggressive. That's how you got girls, right? So those little moments I never forget, and some people go on in life feeling awkward, not having the right swag, not having game, and they just become more aggressive because that's what they think. But without anywhere and any space to talk, because your homies don't want to talk about it, you're just going to keep replicating that and then perpetuating all the things that we're seeing right now.
Or your homies don't even know how to talk about it.
Hold on. To that point, though, what steps do you think that we all need to make to create a safer space for women within this industry? And we can start with you, T.
I mean, within the industry, and I think within our culture and within our personhood as a whole, is creating a space where masculinity could be broader, it could be more diverse. I think one of the things that I have learned through my journey to masculinity and to manhood is that the only two emotions that are valid for a man to have are anger or lust. And if you fall outside of those things, then that takes away from your manhood. You can't be too joyful. You can't be too fearful. You can't be too undecided, or that makes you less of a man. And we start to take away that emotional intelligence, and you start to take away that swath of emotions that makes us human beings, you start to deteriorate, start to chip away at your humanity. And that has a psychological and emotional and mental effect on people, right? And we saw that in the film with L.A. Reid, who passed on Kanye West and passed on John Legend because he was so butthurt that Drew rejected him. Like, that's wild. Like, you're one of the most powerful and richest men in the industry, and you still reverted back to this bully, hurt little boy because a woman said no, because you don't have control over your emotions. And that's the thing. We have to make more space for men to be emotional beings. Being an emotional person is about being a human being. It's about the complexity of our human experience. It really doesn't have anything to do with our gender. And I think that that's what we need to do, is let Black men create a space for Black men to be human beings first.
Yeah. Well, and I want to just piggyback on that real quick too. You know, because you have to, you know, because you're defined by these minimalistic ideas as a man because of society or how you was raised. You know, and then trust me, you know, even right now when you're trying to be vulnerable, you know, as a parent, or you're in a relationship and you're trying to be vulnerable. You know, I've been in those relationships where you try to show vulnerability and the girl's like, yo, you being soft. Why you acting like you acting like a girl? And you're like, I'm trying to open up. Like, why you? And so as a man, you need that support. I know for the ladies that might be, men, I'm gonna speak for the guys that are just learning. You know what I mean? We need that because we are fragile. And as Jidenna said, we are unexperienced in dealing with our emotions. Society doesn't, you know, reward us for showing our emotions. And and then you get into a relationship and you're trying to be these things that you think you're being asked to be, and when you get that feedback that you're being too quote unquote feminine, or too quote unquote this from your partner or in your household, those things, they push you back into your shell, like, man.
Because ironically, it's not just men that uphold patriarchy. It can be women. It can be your moms, it could be your auntie, it could be your partner, and that's
And
unfortunate.
say it,
But that's
your religion.
oh yeah,
Tradition,
all day.
authority, there's a number of
What was the first thing? What do you call God in most of the religion, the major religions? When you don't refer to as God, you say He. He. He is our. I never say that. I will never say it again. I said it as a boy. I will not say it as an adult. And when I have children, they will never say that. I will translate every page in that book to not say he. Because how can we live in a world where constantly you're looking up to this father figure, dear father? And look, I know some people are here who are Muslims, Christians, Jewish people. That's okay. Y'all believe in that, but question why that pronoun is there and what it does. Like if I was a young girl growing up and I constantly referred to God Almighty as a man or a male, what does that do to my psyche? Or as a boy growing up, I think that I'm the God of all the domain. He's the same pronoun you use for me. So those kind of that like those are the type of things that we have to literally question. And once we have an answer, we have to rebuild so that we can rebuild and redesign the world.
That's heavy. Now, Ebro, you had Drew Dixon, the main subject of the film, on your show to discuss her allegations against Russell Simmons and the culture with the music industry. So at a time when so many prominent black men in the media weren't exploring this issue within their work, how important was it to you to share your platform with Drew and interview her on air?
It was paramount. It was necessary. It wasn't even really like it's important. That's it. Like, I don't, the way we run our show, Ebro in the morning is we're trying to create a space, not only a multicultural space, but multi-gender, and have difficult conversations. I think it was an opportunity for everybody to learn because, I've known Russell 30 years, and I've talked to Russell about this movie and about the allegations. And I've told Russell that I feel like he needs to get help, because there's a disconnect between his reality and the people he's hurt and their reality. And I think there's something that he's not understanding or, embracing in this moment about who he is, who he used to be, how he went about his professional life. There's a lot of things you can say, especially about a lot of hip hop executives that came from, Russell was hustling in the street and became one of the biggest executives, in the music business. And on that trajectory, where he was making not only himself millions of dollars, but corporations billions of dollars, was anybody telling him he needed to do better and learn more and be more sensitive? And was anybody holding him accountable? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And if you were a young person coming up in the game, male or female, and you saw some things going on that you thought were, are you going to be the one that potentially gets blackballed from a career working at Def Jam or wherever you were working at the time in the media? People weren't taking those risks, and it's a different time now. So I thought having her on was necessary for us to continue to grow and have honest dialogue about not only where we come from, as a community, as a hip hop community, as Black people, Black men specifically, but where we're trying to get to.
Right, right. Now, Jidenna, on the record, touches on the many forces that silence Black women, including the fear of failing to protect us as Black men. As Drew says in the film, Black women are well acquainted with how Black men are portrayed negatively by the media, so there's a constant fear of contributing to these false narratives. But how, as Black men, can we address this issue and foster a culture where Black women don't feel compelled to protect our well-being at the expense of their own?
Fuck the bro code. Fuck the bro code. That's the first thing. Like, we are no better as men than the police, who have their own code where they don't call out each other.
Yeah.
If we eliminate that kind of culture, and if we don't, Ebro was talking about street culture. Really, you were talking about the code of the streets, right? Rule number 1: no snitching. We can't use that as a blanket statement. It's not just no snitching, just don't talk. You know what I'm saying? Call out people. Call out people that are hurting the hood, that are hurting your neighbors, that are hurting, in this case, women. If we as men make damn sure that in our lifetime and in our generation and the real young generation, the little boys growing up right now, that they look at calling out another boy or another man who's doing any of this behavior that we're talking about, whether it's assault or whether it's being dismissive to a woman, if they grow up like that, thinking of it as a way of honor as opposed to a way of snitching, then I think that we'll create a culture that's safer for women, where women feel supported, where women feel like when they come out, it's not just going to be women saying, yes, sis, I see what you're doing, we stand with you. And they feel like they will actually see men do the same thing. I think that that's like one of the first steps in terms of the cultural values we have right now that we got dead.
Yeah, yeah. Teak, you being a music journalist and a vocal activist on many issues that impact our communities, what's your experience been like working in the music industry and seeing how much masculinity has played a role in the lives of women trying to break into this industry? And how would you define masculinity within this space?
You know, during my time as a music journalist, I interned at 2 major publications. I used to work for one of a huge hip hop manager, artist manager, and I've written for almost all of the publications, right? And during my time being in these industry and in these circles, most of the women behind the scenes are either white or Asian or very, very light skinned. Right. So that was something I took away. Now, what the trajectory of their career is, I don't know. But by watching On the Record, I could gather the things that they've been through. But my assessment of masculinity in these spaces is that masculinity is really performative. It's all performative. It's like wrestling, right? It's performative in these spaces and it's performative out there. So much of Black masculinity is about being men for other men. But when do you start to be men for the women and the girls in your life? Right. It's all about competing with other men, right? So it's navel gazing and it's almost homoerotic. Like your masculinity is only based on what other men think of you. And what happens to these women get reduced down to objects. They're just like the cars and the clothes and the jewelry, all of these things men want to amass in order to be better than the next man next to them. And this is what it comes down to, how women's humanity gets taken away and things like this can happen. So I've seen it and it's just a performance and there's nothing genuine about it. There's absolutely nothing genuine about it at all. And it's something sad to see. And it's not a blueprint that I could really get with or attest to, because I don't want to just gaze at my navel. I want to figure if I'm supposed to be, this idea is men that we're supposed to be pillars in the community. We're supposed to be protectors. But if we're only looking at each other, then who are we protecting? Well, I cannot protect people in my community and in my family if I don't have enough respect for them. If I can't look them in the eye, and then the way that masculinity is defining itself in hip hop, right? Masculinity is only defined by its relationship to everything else. So your masculinity is defined by what you can control, what you can possess, who you better than, how many girls you fucking, okay? Now, once you take all of that away from you, what is left of you? What is left of your humanity? What is left of how you can actually define yourself for yourself? And that's the problem. These men can't define themselves with something that's tethered to their spirit. It's all about in their relationship to something else. And that's not how definitions work. So it's weak and it's wrong.
Right. We can't hear you, Ebro.
Ebro, you're on mute.
Teak, what you're saying is completely on point. Oftentimes when you go to you know, what we used to call Sausage Fest, where it was these dudes rapping mad hard, mad tough on stage, and wasn't no girls. And he'd be like, yo, why am I here, man? There's no women at this place, man. And so what you're saying is facts, but you got to also, you know, while this is permeating our music culture that we love, hip hop, it also is, this is behavior that has been generationally passed on. And the reason I bring that up is only so we can go back and look about and learn about how we got here, right? Because I think we do have to pay attention to our programming, and where it started, not only in our neighborhoods, but in our homes, because that's what comes into this music. And a lot of the music comes from some of the most dysfunctional places, often in hip hop, because these people are expressing a real pain that resonates with people through the music. And if you go and listen to some of the great albums that you love it because it's this authentic pain, you know, these rhymes and this style, and you know, you love it because of the dysfunction. So at a certain point, we're gonna have to like really say to ourselves about the things that we've fallen in love with in music and in culture in general, even outside of hip hop. Why do we even like this? If it's perpetuate, if it continues to perpetuate this toxic behavior and this toxic environment and this, you know, and this trauma, because we can't just, I don't believe we can just come to the moment and not learn from the past, and so we can plan for the future.
Right.
Okay.
Jidenna, you look like you got something to say.
Yeah, I do. It might be in your next question, but let me. I just want to make sure that certainly me and none of the panelists come off as holier than thou, because I think it's very important that we've grown to this point now. I was not always this man. There's been times I was not a protector of women. If anything, I had exhibited plenty of toxic masculinity. Ebro, you just talked about your upbringing. I watched my father yell over my mother almost every night that I lived with him, when we lived together, and then she raised me on her own. My neighbor was abused domestically by her boyfriend pimp. They used to come over. She was a heroin addict, and for me, that was my environment. You know what I'm saying? I thought that watching my father do that I would never do it, and I did the same thing to my partner, multiple. I thought even him being Nigerian, like there's a T-shirt that I saw my homie wearing. It says, "I'm Nigerian. I'm not yelling. I'm not yelling. I'm just Nigerian." So in my head, I rationalized this whole thing. Like I even remember saying to my partner, "I'm. This is how I cry." I literally said that. I'm yelling at you. This is how I cry. How else am I supposed to express this? That's literally how I thought. I remember situations where men had performed a certain type of behavior that women asked and sought out my protection, and I rationalized these men because they were my friend. I rationalized the story to be like, nah, he was just doing this, like XYZ. And I did not take the side. So I'll say that I have not always been this way, but the turn for me was very simple. I started believing the women. Simple. Believe them. Once you start believing women, by default, what starts a whole new perception, a whole new reality comes into your world where you realize both your own faults, you own up to them, and then the faults of some of your homies, your peers, and then people that you don't even know that you see on the internet. But you see it because you believe it. And I think that that's important. And I'm willing to bet that Tick and Ebro and Jay, you as well, probably had these moments and transition points in your life where you really understood it because you believe.
Yeah, I think one question that I get a lot is like, how did I come to become the person that I am today? So I guess I'll ask you guys that question. Was there a definitive moment that made you guys understand that you needed to take more accountability and be more proactive in being vigilant and protecting Black women?
I could say for me, I've been in media for 30 years. So I started doing radio in 1990. My father used to beat my mom, so it was constant police at the crib. My dad was a 3-time felon, in and out of jail. But he would always, you know, admit his wrongs to me. He and my mom broke up when I was 5. My mom was a very strong, super feminist, Jewish activist woman. So she'd been on this for a minute. And, I think just growing up in a household like that, up until the time I was 5, 6, and watching my mom just be strong and understanding just the women around me. And then I was also had a lot of cousins and aunts who were women who raised me, who were very strong also. I had an aunt Doris. She actually would tried to shoot my father because he was wilding. And so I grew up around women that would whoop your ass too and go toe to toe with a dude. So I think I've fortunately went completely away from that violence, because I saw the end result for my father, which was a life in and out of jail, depression, and other things. And one of my flaws personally, since we're talking about it, is I won't even yell and really show emotion in a relationship. I don't argue. I won't, because of the environment that I was raised in, all that yelling, and I don't do all that. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've ghosted on relationships. If the woman I'm seeing is trying to engage with me in a way, and I have this thing like you can't just talk to me like some nigga on the street. Like that's out. Like I don't participate in that. And that's one of my flaws. That's something that I've always had to work on, which is when I see someone that I care about escalating to that kind of, I'm like, all right, now we need to watch our behavior. We need to watch our tone. We need to but that's also a flaw, right? Like people should be able to exhibit their emotion.
Absolutely.
But you know what I mean? And do that. But in my mind, you taking this to a bad place now. You know what I mean? And I've always felt unsafe in that. So that's something that, me and my lady always talk about, is like just making sure we communicate to the best of our abilities. And so fortunately, I've never been in, those relationships that have been that, because I just can't, I'm out. Like, can't even do it. And so I encourage, for me, it's always been about continuing to do the work and learning. And I've had the blessing of working in public and having to articulate my thoughts and emotions live every single morning. That's been my gift of life, is because I have an opportunity every day to not only learn from what I'm saying, but learn from the people I'm working with and learn from the audience that listens to me, and listens to us, to learn how to do things better and communicate better. So there was not really a specific turning point for me. It was just, it's always kind of been a part of my life. Another thing is most of my opportunities to advance in my professional career have been provided to me by women. Women, my first program director job was a Black woman who owned a radio station. And she gave me the job. When I got hired at Hot 97, I was hired by women. When I was made vice president of the whole, group in New York, a woman gave me that job. You know what I mean? So I've always had executive women that I had to, report to, that were my superiors. So, it's never, it hasn't been a turning point. And then, for the last, I worked with Angie Martinez. I guarantee you gonna bow down and have respect, right? Or Miss Jones, or, these are all strong women, you know what I mean, that I've always been around in the workplace. Miss Info, Laura Stiles, these are all strong women. So it wasn't really a turning point for me. I've always worked with women. I've been in this game since I was 15 years old. So it wasn't a specific turning point. It was just really about having people that you love and care about around you who are women, and seeing what they're navigating, and as Jidenna said, listening, believing, and seeing with your own eyes what they have to deal with.
Right. And being mindful of the time, I
Yeah.
want to get to one last question before we open it up to the audience. And this is going to be for Teak. In our collective fight for justice, it's crucial that we remember that we need to fight for all people, all Black people, including the Black trans members of our communities. How do we ensure that trans survivors are empowered to speak out and feel protected by us?
Yeah, for sure. Let me get to that. I just want to jump on that last question a little bit when we talk about a turning point. And just, my story is very different from everybody else because I am transgender. So, I was raised a girl. I had a girlhood, and me being raised as a girl has had a huge effect on the man that I am today. Right. So I've been on the other side. I've lived that life. I didn't transition to my early 20s. So I know what it's like to not be believed. I know what it's like to be followed down the street and be scared out of your mind just when you're trying to get home. I know what it's like to have to make yourself smaller to make other people feel bigger. And as I became a man, I said, that's one thing I was never, ever, ever going to make another woman feel like, because I know what that feels like. Right. And because I was raised a girl, I wasn't given a whole lot of excuses. Nobody gave me any excuses or gave me any passes because of my gender, the way you do boys will be boys. So it was a place where I had to be strong and I had to be responsible in ways that little boys aren't. And that's had a huge effect on my manhood. So for me, there wasn't a turning point. It was just how I evolved from a girl to the man that I am today. Now, we're talking about all Black Lives Matter. When it talks about how do cisgender and straight folks show up for trans folks, just be better. Be better and know that we all have a gendered experience, and this is what my gendered experience looks like, and it doesn't take away from you. Creating space for me to be who I am and to be my most authentic self doesn't mean that you can't be your most authentic self, right? And when we recognize that and understand that we are all human beings, that we're all these cops out here is killing all of us. You know what I'm saying? They're killing Black men, they're killing children, they're killing women, they're killing trans people, they're killing gay people. We have to have a united front and understand it's all, the Black experience is not a monolithic one. Okay, I'm not going to experience my Blackness and my gender like everybody else, but that doesn't mean that we still can't love each other, right? So there has to be more an expansion to what it means to be Black, an expansion to what it means to be a gendered person in this world, and respect that and love that, and also show some love to the fact that a lot of these movements, at the forefront of these movements, are trans people and are queer people. Okay, the Black Lives Matter movement that was uttered first by Patrice Colliers, who is a queer identified woman, the three women who founded Black Lives Matter, 2 of them are queer identified. So many people are organizing, who are on the front lines, who are getting arrested, who are getting pepper sprayed, who are getting beaten up, who are protesting for these Black men who would not piss on fire to put them out. We have to humble ourselves to the fact that Black queer people are out here putting ourselves on the line for cisgender people who don't care about us, right? So, and that has to mean something. There has to mean something to us as Black people, that we have to come together as a community and stop letting these, we have our different identities, and I think it's important for people to be self-determined in their identities, but still we have to be able to love each other. So that's how we show up. Transgender women are women, transgender men are men, and we are all still Black, and it is all still love, and we are all contributing to each other's lives. We are all contributing to the culture. So let's act like it and stop being afraid of that. Stop being afraid of the diversity of gender. Stop being afraid of diversity of sexuality. We all find a place on that spectrum. So be in your spot on the spectrum and love it, but also, respect the other places that people are as well. So we can do this together. We're only better together. We're only better together. And I think once we realize that and have some more strength and some more positivity and some more confidence in who we are, then we can get through this. But until cisgender folks and straight folks get right, it ain't going to get right.
Right, word. While they're getting the questions together from our audience, I'm going to get one more question over to Jidenna. You've spoken about colorism in the past, and on the record, each of the survivors were light-skinned and inherently possessed privilege that made it easier for them to speak out about their abuse. How do you think colorism and perceived desirability plays into the silencing of Black women survivors and how it impacts their decision to come forward? And what can Black men do to address this issue?
I think that number one, we have to just acknowledge the fact that all across the planet, that lighter skin has, in the last few hundred years, been valued over darker skin. So yes, the stories of lighter skinned women are probably going to be more likely to be heard. And that's what you see on the record. And it touches on this. I think that there's a lot of things that we could do, but it's not going to be overnight. I don't think anything that we're talking about is overnight. I think that there's different things that I know I've tried to do, and I will continue to do, which is to show the desire, or as you said, the perceived desirability of women that are not just light skinned, women that are darker skinned as well. So many times you see the rapper come up in the game, the artist come up in the game, and they're like, all right, cool, I'm gonna get me this little light skin thing. And that's like that's the story we're told. I was fed that since the moment I was born. That's what I saw. I would love to see more, not just in music, but in TV and film, of the beauty of darker skinned women as well. When we see that and push that in our fashion shows, in entertainment across the board, then I believe that the stories of women who come forward who may be darker skinned will be heard. Unfortunately, people look at value in terms of how much something is desired, how much somebody is desired. And because we know that, we can be smart and be like, okay, if that's the case, if that's the math, then we're gonna redesign or reprogram this, whatever it is we're doing, whatever in entertainment, so that the next generation grows up and they're like, okay, cool, light skin value, darker skin value. Now I can actually see and hear the stories of women who may not be the same complexion as some of the women on the record. But and last thing I'll say is, like, propaganda has always run the planet. Propaganda for any country that you think was great or wicked, propaganda across the board is how people control the masses, the thoughts of the masses. So I always look at it like we have to redesign our institution, redesign entertainment, and then you can get to a point where people, and in this case, women and Black women, are heard across the board, regardless of complexion.
Facts. Let's get into our first question here. I want to shout out Krista Alexandra.
Jay, I just want to say real quick
ahead.
before the question. Speaking of complexion, I thought when they told me and Jidenna was on this thing together, I thought it was too many light skinned people. So when I saw that it was some other bros with some color,
me and Tweak had to balance it out. You know what I'm saying?
I'm keeping it 100. I was like, nah, I ain't doing no panel with I ain't doing it.
That's all bad. But this question from Krista Alexandria kind of doubles back on something we touched on earlier. And she wants to know, these same images that are perpetuated in our art, and these same images are perpetuated in our art and other industries. What resources are you all using to unlearn, relearn, and reimagine a future of Black familial relationships? I'll start with T.
Sorry, what was that? Say that again? You kind of went out.
It said these same images are perpetuated in our art and other industries. What resources are you using to unlearn, relearn, and reimagine a future of Black familial relationships?
Oh, that's a hard question. I don't know. I think my resources really is coming from Black women, and not necessarily expecting Black women to educate me, but just listening to them. Right. And listening to what their experiences are, and asking questions not to invalidate their truths, but asking questions to complicate my own. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think when we want to start to have a shift, you want to be complicated a little bit. You want to get to a point where you're vulnerable enough to say, you know what, I'm a little fucked up here. I think how I'm thinking is a little messed up. And once you can be vulnerable like that, on the other side of vulnerability is courageous, right? So you have to have the courage to say, I'm vulnerable here, I'm kind of messed up, and I want to listen to you, and I want to ask you questions that come from an authentic place of curiosity. I don't want to ask questions to diminish or dismiss how you feel. And I think that that's what needs to be done. So it's more like a conversation, but like specific books and resources, I don't know, I have to send you like a Google Doc later or something. But right now, it's really just having these conversations and being and just asking those questions that can complicate my own sense of my truth.
Jidenna?
You know, it's interesting hearing you talk, Teak, and then Ebro as well. I feel like, and Jay, you touched on this, we've all been trained to be better men by women.
Yep.
Excellent.
Whether it was women in our family or friends, Teak, your experience as being raised as a girl and then transitioning, so already knowing and embodying it. I think even I had a quote that was Beyonce used in Black is King. I literally talked about being assembled, reassembled, men being reassembled by women. So I do think I agree with listening. If somebody's looking for a specific book, I'm gonna suggest a book, that a new one, because I suggest books all the time. But this is one that I think that can help with anybody struggling in their relationships, dealing with, like Ebro was saying, like kind of holding back and being like, oh, I don't want to get too I don't want it to get too intense in arguments because of how I was raised, or me when I had a history of doing that and then just like wilding out verbally. Like the book that helped me the most at the time was this book called The Spirit of Intimacy. It's by this author named Sobonfu Some. She's a shaman. Her husband is Mali Doma Some. They're both shamans from Burkina Faso. But the book talks specifically about creating ritual space every month, per se. Like that's what I did with my partner, where you literally you can put candles around you, you sit down, you create intentional space, whatever you pray to or however you pray, whether it's ancestors, God, whatever, you make intentional space. And then y'all really talk through the issue. Y'all can sit back to back. Some people sit side to side, but you have that space every single month to talk about what's working well or to express your grievances. That having that every month helps you so that when you get into an argument or a dispute, you don't have to like fit it all in there, and you know, like, okay, I can rely on that space every month. So I don't have to like try to force it in now. And that's gonna be a more peaceful space. And that book, Spirit of Intimacy, is what taught me that. So that's what I'll say to her.
Yeah, Ebro, you have any resources you would recommend?
I just Googled Unlearn Patriarchy. There's a whole thing on, Google's your friend on
Right.
this one, boy. For real. I was surprised. They had like 10 whole spaces with downloadable documents and everything. There's a book that just we were talking about before we came live on this live tonight, that I suggest everyone reads, which is more specifically tied to social programming and, the hierarchy of social programming, and really built around this idea of power and who has the power to say who gets what power in society. And the book is called Caste: The Origins of Our Discontents. And it examines the caste systems of India, Nazi Germany, and America. And if you don't think America has anything to do with Nazi Germany, you would be highly mistaken. And if you didn't know that, delve into it. They Nazi Germany studied American society. The Third Reich, the Second Reich, did terrible things in Namibia and in Africa prior to them executing the Holocaust. And the original caste systems, which I think were like 5,000 BC or something like that in India, when you talk about the Central Asians and the Indo-Aryans, it's all bundled up nice and tight about a lot of our programming. And so I suggest a lot of people delve into that if you really want to dig in. Isabel Wilkerson's an amazing author. It's called Caste: Origins of Our Discontents.
Yeah.
I do think it's reading. I think a lot of it is reading. Like we talked about listening to women. I think the reading, something about that redesigns you. I remember speaking about that with you, Ebro, when we was in Ghana, at the president's crib.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that's like one of the most crucial things for me, has been just digging in, learning and unlearning. And I hope that a lot of men here. That's why I started a Black Men's Book Club. We started a book club and a show called The Lit Review, and with Ebro, Nana's on that show, and then my homie Yusuf Muhammad. So that was crucial for us, because we were like, yo, if men are not reading, which we don't read nearly as much as Black women, then we're not going to unlearn everything that we were fed.
Word.
And you know, for men out there who, you know, have a hard time expressing themselves, you know, I know hip hop doesn't get a lot of credit because of the misogyny and the dysfunction that's in a lot of the music. And, you know, growing up, girls, they always kept their journal, you know, they always wrote their thoughts. But these young men out here writing their thoughts too.
They
and
are.
So they're writing their thoughts, and we may not like their thoughts, or their thoughts might, but they're their thoughts. These are their thoughts. And I think, you know, we can do all of ourselves. We can do our community and young men a service to listen to what they're talking about, and really hear the pain and the things that they're talking about, and the fact that we can engage with them. They want love. They really want love. They really want to be accepted. And a lot of us come from harsh, unaccepting circumstances. And, you know, I think we can all, you know, for the young men out there, just know, man, write your thoughts down, and you're powerful. And with power, I know it's cliche, with power comes great responsibility. And if you're the man that you think you are, and you're as tough and strong as you think you are, and all of that, you ain't got no business minimizing a woman or somebody that literally looks to you for love and protection.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you harm or hurt that person?
Yeah. We got one last question from the audience. And this is, outside of speaking out, what tangible ways do you think Black men in the entertainment industry can use their platforms, capital, and influence to actively support and uplift the voices and work of Black women? We'll start with you, T.
Well, I think, you know, Black men with resources and a platform should put their money where their mouth is. You know, if you got some extra money, start donating to some organizations that are empowering women, that are helping women who have been disenfranchised, who are victims of domestic abuse. You know, when you know better, you do better. So if you know better, start calling your brothers in and checking them when they're being shitty to women, or when they're saying things that are misogynistic, or when they're violent, or saying like awful violent things about trans people or LGBTQ people, using your platform to be an allyship with people who are different from you, and doing that internal work as well, like figuring out, you know, where your power is and where your privilege is. We always go to this place that Black men don't have privilege. We absolutely have privilege in the world. And the thing is, it's not about dismissing that privilege and trying to argue it away. It's not about being guilty about it. It's about finding solidarity, right? So, you know, guilt is never useful. Only your solidarity is. So figuring out, us as individuals who have a little platform, who have a little bit of money, how can we be in solidarity with people whose necks we have our foot on in a lot of different ways. So I think that that's what we could do first.
Jidenna?
I think it's important that we highlight women that are not celebrities, not known, not famous, because there's way more women who are not famous than are. I know one thing that I did that I want to do more of. There was an issue that arose with OK Africa, and many of the employees, and then one woman who was not an employee, who talked about the toxic environment of my friend at the time, you know, that he created as CEO of the company. And, you know, there was many things that we did behind closed doors and also in the public. But one thing that I made sure to do was we had created merch with OK Africa, and I literally told OK Africa that any of those merch sales, one, we got to discontinue it all. But whatever you're doing with the stock merch, send that to the women who have who were in this toxic environment, because I knew they were creating a media company. These kind of moves, these were not women that were well known in the world, but their power and what they contributed to the culture, especially to what's been happening with the African diaspora and the unity with the continent, was crucial. So the least I could do was value them as people, as women, as contributors to the culture, and try to highlight, amplify their voice. And lastly, find a way to do it economically so that they could lift off and have some seed capital to start what they were doing. So I think these are the kind of ways that we can improve if we have a platform, is just to highlight and amplify voices that have not been heard.
Yeah, Ebro.
What I normally try to do is when I see women working on something where I think maybe I could be helpful, is I just give a call, ask what's needed, how can I help? You know, I have a platform. You know, on payday, I got a couple of dollars in my pocket. You know what I mean? And so I try to, you know, move the money around, make donations, give the platform, and rinse, repeat, and keep it going. You know, there's a lot of powerful women that I work with every week, from, you know, the Gathering for Justice with Carmen Perez and Linda Sarsour, to, you know, Tamika Mallory, Until Freedom. You know, my girl Laura Stiles at the station, she does a lot of work with young women. So I'm always just available, you know, because, you know, I work with a lot of women and a lot of strong women. So even if even if I'm asleep at the wheel, they're gonna smack me up and be like, "Hey, pay attention,"
100.
you know,
Yeah.
or you know. So I get smacked up a lot, man. You know, when I screw up, I get called on it, whether it's from the women that listen to me in the morning, or, you know, my personal life. It's, you know, the women that I'm around that help me get through the day. Do not, you know, they do not bite their tongue at all.
Word.
Yep.
Word.
Same.
Word. Well, once again, I'd like to thank HBO Max and Hot 97 for facilitating this much needed conversation, as well as each of our panelists for being honest and forthright in their expressed desire to both cherish and protect Black women. For those of you joining us tonight, my hope is that you not only walk away with some insight to continue this discussion within your own communities, but that each of you accepts a responsibility to be much more vigilant in protecting Black women at all costs. To Drew Dixon, Sherry Sher, Lai Abrams, Megan Thee Stallion, Jaguar Wright, Maya Moody, and other victims of abusive behavior at the hands of Black men, you have my sincerest apologies on our collective behalf for our failure to preserve your safety and protect you. I salute your courage and remain committed to not only doing better myself, but holding my peers accountable to do the same. And if you haven't watched On the Record yet, be sure to check it out on YouTube and HBO Max, where it's being streamed for free until September 12th. So for more information, head over to On the Record. Peace out, y'all.
All right, y'all.